read all of these books in January and it made me very, very happy. Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well. My name is Amoy and welcome back to my channel. I'll keep this intro nice and short. Basically, I'm going to be going through all the books I read in January, of which there are 9, which is a lot more than I thought. And I'll give like a little short, like kind of review of what I thought of them. Yeah, let's get into it. So before I begin, at the beginning of the year, I set a reading goal of 30 books this year, only because I'd never set a reading goal for the year before, and I thought 30 books was okay. I was like, maybe I'll read like 2, maybe 3 books a month. And then I read 9 books, and I was like, okay, so 30 is not a big enough goal. So I've now changed it to 80. Anyways, enough of that. The first book I read in January was They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera, and it's exactly what it says on the tin, like it does happen at the end, and it was the most soul-crushing ending I've ever read. Like the book isn't really like happy throughout, because you kind of know what's going to happen, but it was honestly so good. This was the first book I read by this author, and I read another book by him in January also, which I will get to. But yeah, honestly, I do really recommend. It's fiction, obviously, and it's just the plot like intensifies and the writing also gets better with it as well. So it follows like these 2 guys, Rufus and Mateo, and it basically follows them on their last day on Earth. There's like this system called like the death cast, and they call you in the morning on the day of when like you're gonna die, and they don't tell you how or like when exactly it will happen. They just say it's gonna happen at some point today, and it's quite like a morbid plot line. But this book was like so good. I gave it 5 stars. I loved it. I do recommend it. I don't think it was like expensive either. It was like £8. I do recommend it. The second book I read in January was The Beauty Myth by Naomi Wolf. And I'm not gonna lie, guys, I was really disappointed with this book actually. Like, I gave it 2 stars. Like, that's the lowest rating I've ever given any book. And a part of me was like, is 2 stars even too much? But yeah, I was really excited to read it because like it's like a staple feminist text, but it was written like in the 90s. And the main thing that brings this book down is that, she makes a lot of like really good points, but then kind of ruins it with like these overgeneralizations and these points that don't really make sense at times. So the book is basically linking like ideals of beauty to like the emergence of like capitalism, which makes sense. She makes some really good like staple points, but sometimes it just feels like she's not really being very specific. Like this book is not intersectional like at all, so she spends a lot of the time saying women and all women experience this, but then she's actually only really describing the experiences of like white middle to upper class women. And yeah, so I tend to prefer to read like intersectional feminist writings because I feel like they have the like necessary nuance. Yeah, this book is not bad. Like, some people in the reviews absolutely loved it. I, however, was quite disappointed with it. But feel free to have a read of it yourself and see what you think. Don't just like take my word for it. The third book I read in January was Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo, and I absolutely loved this book. I gave it 5 stars. It was great. I read it in about like 2 or 3 days, and it was just, I loved it. So basically, each chapter is about like a different like woman or like person, and it basically kind of goes through the story of their life. But so the book starts with like the kind of main person who kind of brings all of these people together, but not all of the characters know each other. But when you like read their chapters, like they would have come across another one of the characters in some way. And in some ways it's very obvious because like one of the chapters is like the mum and the next chapter would be like the daughter. But in other ways it's kind of less obvious, and I just think this plot was put together like so nicely. Like, I would say this is definitely the most fluent fiction book I've ever read. Like, you can tell it was like carefully planned, and all the detail was lovely, and all of the characters are just so unique and like different in their own ways, and it was just a really lovely reading experience. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. I do recommend. The fourth book I read in January was Women, Race and Class by Angela Davis. And if you may not know who Angela Davis is, but she's a feminist writer, an intersectional feminist writer, and I did enjoy this book a lot. So this book is it's very like America focused. I will make that clear. It's very like America focused, because she is American. Those are like her experiences. But in this book, she basically goes through the history of like the women's suffrage movement, of like the abolitionist movement, and each chapter kind of looks at different intersections and how they were working. She was looking at like classism in the suffrage movement, racism in the suffrage movement. She was looking at sexism within the abolitionist movement. Like, there are so many different aspects that she like analyzes and talks about and explains the history of really clearly. That was another thing. This book is so like not easy to read, but it's accessible, and she kind of doesn't just assume that you will know what all of these things are already. She explains them really well, and I did really enjoy it. I can't remember how many stars I gave it, probably 5, but if not 5 then maybe 4. But yeah, I do recommend you for looking for like some good intersectional feminist writing. Alright, so the 5th book I read in January was Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport. This is also a book I bought in January. I did make a video of a big January book haul that I did, so feel free to check that out. I'm currently basing my life off of this book. So in this book, Cal Newport is kind of going through like how to live a digitally minimalist life and like reduce your screen time, like spending less time on social media / online in general. And that's what I'm kind of like trying to do now, especially with it being like a 3rd lockdown. Like, it seems like there's nothing else to do apart from like just scroll through social media. But one thing that I quite liked is that he's not explicitly telling people to like, oh, just, disconnect from the online world, don't like, be a part of it. He's more telling you how to actually like assess the time you're spending online and figuring out if the time you're spending online is actually valuable to you. What is it that you can do on your phone that can be like more effective and more valuable? Like, are you actually connecting with people, or are you just like pressing like and then moving on with your day? But I thought it was quite nice. I did give it only 4 stars though, because I felt like at some points in the book it was kind of out of touch. I mean, I mentioned this in my other video as well. But there was one point where he's talking about people who live like a really frugal lifestyle and like just move to the woods and disconnect from the world. And whilst he was saying that this is something people should do, it also just kind of felt a bit like, well, not everyone actually has the means to be able to do that. But that was just like a little small point. It doesn't actually change the overall experience of reading the book. I believe this is book number 6, and it's Queenie by Candace Carty-Williams. Another book that I bought in January. The rest of the books I read in January were books I also bought in January. And I did also talk about these in my January book haul video. But yeah, Queenie by Candace Carty-Williams. Loved it. I read it in like just over a day. And I said this in my other video as well, but I think if you've read Girl, Woman, Other by Bernadine Evaristo and enjoyed it, I think you'd also enjoy Queenie, just because they're kind of similar, not like characters, not even like the same kind of writing, but just they deal with like similar themes, and I thought that was quite nice. But basically the main character is this girl called Queenie, and it kind of like follows her life starting from this point where she kind of goes through this like massive breakup, and throughout the whole book you basically kind of see the journey she goes on, where she kind of realizes things about herself. She kind of assesses the kind of relationship she has with like her friends and family and like her job, and it feels really realistic. There were some parts of this book where it just felt too real and I had to put it down for a second, but it was really good to read. And also like Candace Carty-Williams' like way of writing, I didn't forget her name just then, I was just on my words, but her way of writing, it's quite like you want to keep reading on, and I think that just makes a good author. Although the first few pages of the book I was a little bit confused. I was like, I'm not too sure where this is going, but I'll keep reading, and I'm very glad I kept reading. It also, pretty sure, it was longlisted for the Booker Prize, which is a really prestigious award, and I've heard about this book for so long, and I don't know why it took me so long to read it. Number 7, I believe we're at now, is Notes on a Nervous Planet by Matt Haig. I think I gave this book 4 stars, but it's a really easy read. So in this book, he's basically kind of talking about the kind of anxieties of the world and ways we can kind of like deal with it. It was quite a refreshing thing to read, and the reviews of this book are all like glowing. Although I will say at some points, when he's kind of talking about all these terrible things happening in the world, it was kind of anxiety inducing for me, because I was like, okay, well, I wasn't thinking about all of these terrible things at the moment, and now you've put them all on one page and I'm thinking about them a lot. I need to like take a break. But it's actually quite like a relaxing read. I say like it's quite a refreshing, like kind of relaxing read. I probably wouldn't suggest reading this before bed because it's just creates like a lot of thoughts happening in your mind. But it's not a bad book. It was really easy to read because like the size of the text is like massive, and a lot of the pages are like half pages. So it was really easy to get through. I read this in about a day, so yeah. I do recommend. It wasn't that expensive either. It was like £10, which is like, which I think for a book this size where the words are really big, I'm like a little bit of a rip off. But if you're interested in this book, then it could be worth it. Book number 8 is Histories or You Left Me, also by Adam Silvera. So after I read They Both Die at the End, I was like, I need to see what else this man has written. So I bought this, I read it, and I loved it. Although the first like 30 pages, I was like, I'm not too sure what's going on here. I don't know how this ties into the entire plot. But then I was actually like really hooked after about 30 pages, which sounds like a lot of pages, but I think there was a lot of like setting up that was being done, a lot of pieces being put together. But after that, it kind of like picks up a bit, which was really nice. So this book basically follows the story of like the main character Griffin, and his ex like dies, and so he kind of befriends the guy who was his ex's new boyfriend, and like they're trying to find out more about, you know, their collective ex. Um yeah, and it's really like heart-wrenching at times. The ending was quite like satisfying. It wasn't like super soul-crushing like They Both Die at the end. But it was a really good read, and even though it took about like 30 pages before things really started to pick up, it still like wasn't bad. I think it might have just been me where I was a little bit confused. But like kind of each chapter like switches between like the past and then the present, and yeah, I do really recommend. The last book I read in January was All About Love by Bell Hooks. Bell Hooks is like a feminist writer, incredible. I'd been seeing this book around a lot, and then every time I went to buy it, it would be out of stock. And then when I saw it and it was in stock, I was like, okay, I've got to get it before it goes out of stock again. And it was really good. I think I gave it like 4 or 5 stars. But basically, each chapter she talks about like a different kind of love, and like how people can incorporate that into their lives, and also giving like not like guidelines for love, but like she kind of explains things really well. I don't really know like how to describe it, but she just kind of talks about like what love actually is. That's the whole point. She's exploring the concept of it, being like, oh, people think love is this, but is it actually like more of like these other things? And I think her way of writing is like super clear and it's easy to understand. I will say though, at some points it feels like she's making some like she kind of expects too much from humanity at some points in this book. She's like, oh, if everyone, you know, just loved each other, it's so easy for everyone to just love each other and get along and be a community. And it's sort of like, well, like, it's kind of not really. And it just feels a bit like, I don't want to say like utopian, but it feels like she has a lot of expectations from humanity. And I think her point of view is that like, oh, well, like, we can get there eventually if people, you know, make these like small changes. So she does make really good points. I just think at some points it's a lot. It's just a lot. That is all the books I read in January. I thought I was going to get through like 2, maybe 3, and most of these books I read in the second half of January. It's now February, and I've read 2 books so far. I'm on my 3rd one at the moment. So expect a video at the end of February where I sum up all the books I read in February. Yeah, as I said before in my last video, expect a lot of book content from me. So it's, you know, I just love books. I can't help it. Yeah, feel free to comment below how many books you read in January, or what books you would like to read in February. I'm always looking for new recommendations. Let me know if you've read any of these books as well, or like what you thought of them. Don't just like take my word for it. Like, feel free to read these books for yourself and form your own opinions. That is absolutely fine. But yeah, other than that, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a lovely day.